Ah, yes. You want to bully your opponent. You do not want to special summon from the extra deck. You don't want to use all these modern things. You don't want to synchro. You don't want to link. You don't want to pendulum. You don't want to fuse. You don't want to do any of that. You just want to normal summon and tribute summon, and your opponent doesn't get to play the game. Then this deck might be for you. Floowandereeze is the most hated deck by good Yu-Gi-Oh players because generally good Yu-Gi-Oh players can sometimes randomly lose to much worse players than them, purely because those worse players played Floowandereeze and got a little lucky. If that's something you want to do, you want to make much better players very angry at you, here we go, Floowandereeze. So the whole archetype relies on these little birds, normal summoning and then tribute summoning, and for some reason, meta decks just keep losing to it. So it all starts with Robina. Robina is the most important card in the deck. If you draw a Robina, you're probably winning. It says if this face-up card would leave the field, banish it instead. That's something you're going to be seeing with all of these cards. They don't go to graveyard. You can only use each of the following effects of Floowandereeze and Robina once per turn and cannot special summon during the turn you activate either effect. So as you can see, no special summoning. You're just going to normal summon. If this card is normal summoned, you can add one level 4 or lower winged beast monster from your deck to your hand. Then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one winged beast monster. So you're not specialing, but you're kind of specialing. You're just going to normal summon again. If a winged beast monster is normal summoned to your field while this card is banished, you can add this card to your hand. So you're not going to be minusing from doing all of this. Then we have the next one in the chain. We have Floowandereeze and Empen. If this face-up card would leave the field, banish it instead. You can only use each of the following effects. Cannot special summon. Again, same line. Then, if this card is normal summoned, you can add one level 7 or higher winged beast monster from your deck to your hand. Then, immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one winged beast monster. If a winged beast monster is normal summoned to your field while this card is banished, you can add this card to your hand. So again, they have a lot of the same stuff, but they're basically gonna go Robina into this, and then this is gonna search your other stuff, and then you're gonna end up on an Empen. Empen is the boss of this deck, but we'll get to that later. Then we have two of the Stree. Once again, all the same line of text, but this one also says if this card is normal summoned, you can target one card in either graveyard, banish it, and then after that, you immediately normal summon. So this is basically a DD Crow on its summon, but in the archetype. Next, we have the Toucan as a one-off. You can search it anyway. If this card is normal summoned, you can target one of your banished Floowandereeze cards, add it to your hand, and then immediately after, once again, just all those normal summons. But the whole main combo basically relies on you drawing Robina. This deck does get more consistent later on. There is a search spell that basically fixes everything for you, but right now we don't have that. Next, we have Max C, because this card is absolutely broken. We have one barrier statue. Notice how this is a winged beast, and it says neither player can special summon monsters except wind monsters. So you basically search this, you normal summon it during your opponent's turn, and hey, they can't special summon, so a lot of decks literally cannot play the game. Next, we have the card that I currently don't have crafted, but it's the only reason Floo is really that hated, in my opinion, and that's Dimension Shifter. It's a hand trap, and it says if you have no cards in your graveyard, quick effect, send this card from your hand to the graveyard until the end of the next turn. Any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So you go first and you open with this, your opponent can't reply to anything you do. But you go second and you can activate this, your opponent can't play the game. Essentially, your wins, and basically auto wins, depend entirely on if you draw this card for a turn or not. If you draw this card for a turn, GG. Well, here's your Dimension Shifter. Your opponent doesn't get to play the game. It is an unfair, absolute ridiculous card. And Floowandereeze is one of the decks that doesn't care about it. And that's really important. You know, almost every deck needs the graveyard in some way, but this one doesn't. And so you can basically say, hey, neither player gets to use their graveyard. You play under a Dimension Shifter with no problems whatsoever, but your opponent cannot, and then you basically auto win. So again, this is why really good players hate this deck, because it's like a coin toss on whether you win or lose, depending on if your opponent opened this ridiculous card. Next, we have Ryza, the Mega Monarch. You can tribute summon this card by tributing one tribute summon monster. If this card is tribute summoned, target one card on the field and one card in either graveyard. Also, if this card was tribute summoned by tributing a wind monster, you can target an additional card on the field, place the first target on the top of the deck in any order. Also, after that, return the additional target, if any, to the hand. So you can tribute summon this in your opponent's turn and then basically spin cards. Your opponent doesn't like that because they already had to play through a bunch of other stuff as well, especially if there's also a Dimension Shifter. Next, we have Empen. Empen is the reason this deck exists. It is the end board board, essentially. Again, combined with maybe a barrier statue, maybe a Ryza on top of that. Now, some people also like to play the Mist Valley Apex Avion. If you want to run that, go ahead. I personally don't, but there's a lot of really good players that do, so, you know, up to you. Some people also only play one Empen. It's possible. I like the safety of the two, but hey. This card says, if this card is tribute summoned, you can add one Floowandereeze spell or trap from your deck to your hand. Then, immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one monster. While this tribute summoned card is in the monster zone, your opponent cannot activate the effects of special summoned monsters they control in attack position. So this is basically like a skill drain. Once per battle during damage calculation, if this card battles an opponent monster, quick effect, you can banish one card from your hand. That opponent's monster's current attack/defense becomes halved until the end of this turn. So your opponent can't really use a lot of effects, especially from link monsters, because those are always forced into attack. But then they also really can't beat this by battle. So it's a really annoying card to play around. It does get outed by a droplets, of course, but you also, of course, could have your barrier statue on top. And so now they're basically losing 3 cards, being the droplets itself and the 2 discards, just to play around these 2. And then, of course, if they're under Dimension Shifter, whatever, it's over. GG. Next, we have one gold sarcophagus. Basically, this plus any of the birds is full combo. Then we have Pot of Duality. This is one of the pot draw cards, and this is one of the few decks that can actually use it, because as you know, Pot of Duality says you cannot special summon during the turn you activate this card. But luckily, this deck doesn't tend to special summon anyway. Then we have one Pot of Extravagance, really because you just need to play a bunch of pots. You desperately want to open your Robina. And so, yeah, you're gonna have to play a bunch of pots to get it. Extravagance is generally the worst one because it only draws 2. And again, you need the Robina above all else. So while Duality might only add 1 card, so you have less card advantage, being able to look at 3 instead of 2 is actually really important. You don't really care about card quantity, you care about card quality. And Robina is the quality. So that's why only 1, but still I wanted to have a solid amount of pots. And of course, resolving an Extravagance isn't bad either. It's a really good card. Next, we have Pot of Prosperity. This is the best pot because it can look for the most. As you see, this extra deck is a bit of a meme. I just have some placeholder shit. You know, if you have other things you want to run, go ahead. Generally, you're not really going to go into your extra, except for, you know, a few of these cards. I'll talk about them, but it's very rare. You will gladly just get rid of 6 cards for Pot of Prosperity just to please draw that Robina to hopefully auto win. Next, we have the map. During your main phase, you can reveal one level 1 Floowandereeze monster in your hand and banish one Floowandereeze card with a different name from your deck. Then immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon the revealed monster. So this is an extra normal summon. If your opponent normal summons a monster, immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon one Floowandereeze monster. So once again, you get an extra interaction in your opponent's turn through this field spell. If you have the room or if you own one, a terraforming is also pretty good to search. Then we have one of the continuous field spell Floowandereeze and the Unexplored Winds. You can conduct tribute summons that require 2 tributes by sending one monster you control and one card your opponent controls to the graveyard instead of tributing. So this is another way to interact with your opponent. And then during your main phase, you can reveal up to 2 winged beast monsters in your hand and place them on the bottom of your deck in any order. Then draw the same number of hearts. Okay, this is like a hand destruction or a magical mallet, basically. Then we have 3 Book of Moon. Again, this can be used going second to get rid of pesky monsters, but also going first, you just set this. It's another piece of interaction. Now we have 2 Called By, because we do die to certain hand traps. Droll really hurts for this deck. Ghost Ogre on the field spell can also hurt, amongst some other things. So, you know, of course, Called By is just a crazy card. Like, if your opponent has a DPE, being able to Called By that is also huge. We have one Forbidden Droplet. It's a fine card. Modern Floowandereeze decks, the ones with the Searcher, the ones we tend to see at tournaments right now, rather than in Master Duel, like to run Dark Ruler no more as well at 3 copies. So if you want to make room for that, go ahead. You might want to run higher copies of Droplet too. I really just wanted to run the 1 so that worst case we can still max C into it. Then we have the Trap card, Floowandereeze and the Dreaming Town. During the main phase, immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon one level 4 or lower Wing Beast monster. So basically in your opponent's turn, you activate this, and that way you interact with your opponent by doing one more of those summons. And that can be like the barrier statue or one of your other things. Then if you tribute summon a level 7 or higher monster while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish this card, change all monsters your opponent controls to face down defense position. So it's basically a Book of Moon on top of that. And then finally, we have this unfair, ridiculous card. That's a Vanity's Emptiness. Neither player can special summon monsters. That's it. It's a ridiculous floodgate. If you go first and you open this, GG, you won. Now for the extra, you see here, these are just placeholders. You can do what you want with these. They're in here for the pots. Some people like to play Dogmatica Punishment in this deck. And so then they'll play something like Elder Entitans or something like that. If you have more copies of some of the cards that are in here, so you don't feel bad about randomly extravaganzing them or, you know, sending them away with a second prosperity or something, that's fine. In my opinion, it's not really a big deal. I just have placeholder garbage here. However, now we have the cards that do sometimes come up. All the Floowandereeze cards say that the turn you use them, you can't special summon. And while that is true, sometimes you will have created the board and then your opponent can't play the game and then passes back to you. And that's when you might Xyz summon some of these. So for example, the Liverlusk one says, once per turn you can detach one material from this card. Until the end of this turn, Liverlusk monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Also, you take no battle damage. This card can also attack directly. So what you can do is you can make this attack directly. Nothing they do will destroy this. Then you can downerd on top of that, because downerd just says during your main phase 2, you can Xyz summon this card by using a rank 3 or lower Xyz monster. So this is a rank 3 or lower. So you downerd on top of that. And then Zeus says, if an Xyz monster battles this turn, which was the assembled Nightingale, you can put that Zeus on top of an Xyz monster. So on top of the downerd. So now you have this Liverlusk assembled with 1 or 2 materials. Then you put a downerd on top and then a Zeus on top. So you have a Zeus with a bunch of material in order to wipe the board. So your opponent can't necessarily break through. So that's why we're playing 3 of this and 1 of this Promenade, whatever the hell, together with the downerd and the Zeus. This is the only thing that you might actually make. We also have 1 relinquished anima, just in case it comes up. Again, very rare. And then finally, we have this Tribergating. If you are trying to play on a budget, don't make this. It's almost never gonna come up, but theoretically, it's possible. So that is the Floowandereeze deck. I hope you found this very interesting. If you have any questions, put them in the comments down below. Again, you are able to maybe, depending on the meta, change some stuff. Like if you want to play an Imperm in here, or maybe some other hand trap, be my guest. But overall, this is a pretty solid way to get started. In my opinion, pretty close to optimal. Of course, we would like to get the Searcher to get even more access to Robina, because that's what the whole deck is about. But if you open Dimension Shifter and Robina, good job, you won the game. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.